We will be seeing 4 different types of market structure in this case. And the first one that we will be seeing is the perfectly competitive market structure, or the one that we refer to when we speak of perfect competition or competitive markets. This is typically the one that we're talking about. For each of these market structures, it depends on how they are structured to determine which of these it's part of. So to start off, we want to know what are the common assumptions, what are the common things that make a market structure perfectly competitive. The first one, which is one of the bigger ones to remember, is that there is an infinite amount of buyers and sellers. What's this going to do is it's going to mean that no buyer or seller has influence on the market price, as is mentioned here. The market price will be determined by the market forces, but there is not one big player in this field. Not necessarily the case if we think of the phone industry or something else, where there is very big players. We're dealing with identical or homogeneous products. What this means is that these products cannot be differentiated. So you cannot compare 2 different brands of beer, or you cannot compare 2 different brands of cars, you cannot compare 2 different brands of anything which seems to have some difference involved. Even though you're talking about Coke and Pepsi, which are very similar, they are still differentiated. Some people still prefer one and some still prefer the other. So identical/homogeneous products could be products such as very standardized products, which we often refer to as commodities. So what are commodities? You could think of oil, a certain grade of oil, regardless if it comes from the States, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran. It's the same grade of oil. If you're speaking of a specific one, shale, oil from the tar sands that comes from Canada, though, could be considered slightly different because it's a lesser quality oil. However, if you go on a commodities exchange, you would see that certain classes of oil are grouped together. Other goods that could probably be seen as identical or homogeneous, you could think of gold, you could think of any type of precious metals, anything which you're not really sure what the origin is, and if it could get melted and any supplier could produce this or sell you this product, you could think they're pretty much identical in that case. Free entry and exit into and out of the market. So firms, buyers, and sellers have to be able to enter and exit this market. So if you have a new competitor who wants to produce oil, it is possible. There is no blockage going on. If a new producer wants to produce a certain pharmaceutical drug, well, he can. But if you think of the presence of patents or copyrights, intellectual property, this limits entry into a market based on certain laws. So this is very important. You have to have free entry and exit. And the last one is just to make things simpler, is perfect information about all the buyers and sellers. Just helps us determine the price, so there's no ambiguities here. And this one here is the one that's going to be always used as an assumption. This last one. So it's these 3 that will determine what market structure we're in. So if we think of a monopoly, which will be seen next in chapter 10, well, the big difference between all of these is that you have one seller. So you no longer have many buyers and sellers. And because you only have one seller, you're not dealing with identical products. There's only one product available by one seller. And what makes a monopoly often is different laws based on patents or exclusive rights over selling beer at the Bell Center or something else like that, which means that there is not free entry and exit in this case. which would mean that in the case of a monopoly, you'd have one seller and no free entry and exit. Yeah. We'll see what happens with imperfect competition with the other two market structures. It's going to be a blend of these two extremes. But for now, knowing this, you could start thinking about different products and seeing could this work as perfectly competitive. So every buyer and seller is a price taker in this type of market structure. So the things that we're going to be interested in all types of market structures, we're going to be interested in looking at the revenue side now. So in chapter 7, we looked at the cost side with variable costs, average fixed costs, average total costs, and marginal costs. Now we're looking at the revenue side, and it's going to help us determine the optimal quantity to sell and at what price to price our product. But here, in a perfectly competitive market, we take the price as given. So P, the price, is the same regardless of the quantity sold. If I sell 1 unit and the market price tells me I could sell it for $10, or I sell 1,000 units and it still says it's $10, if I'm such a small player that I cannot influence the price, I could supply just as much of this product as I want or just as little, and it will have no influence on the price. The price will stay what it is. So what is total revenue? Well, total revenue is simply going to be my price times my quantity. Average revenue. Well, an average is kind of trying to find out what's my revenue per unit of sold. So if I think, well, what's my total revenue? And I want to know what's the revenue per unit sold, I have to divide it by how many units are sold. Therefore, if I look at how total revenue was obtained, I could see that was P times Q for total revenue. And if I'm dividing it by Q as well, you could think that these two Q's get canceled out, and average revenue is simply equal to the price. Marginal revenue, on the other hand, is change in total revenue as a result of an additional unit sold of the output, meaning that in this case, if I sell an extra unit, I'm going to have an extra amount of total revenue for a certain change in output. So if I sell one more unit of output, because that unit of output will always give me the same exact price, well, I know that my marginal revenue will be equal to my price as well. So in the case of a perfectly competitive firm, we have a situation where price is equal to average revenue is equal to marginal revenue. If you're not convinced, just think about this table. If you were to ignore these last 3 lines and you just had this piece of information, you're looking at quantities, different quantities you could supply, and the price that you will face. And as mentioned, the price that you will face will not change. So total revenue is simply multiplying your price times your quantity, and you get your total revenue. If you divide this total revenue by the production level, by the quantity, you're going to obtain the average revenue. This is not possible when you have 0 production because you have 0 total revenue. So you can't really divide 0 by 0. But over here, for all these other ones, you see 2 divided by 1, 4 divided by 2, 6 divided by 3. All of these yield an average revenue equal to $2. Whereas my marginal revenue is always going to be what's my increase in revenue going from 0 to 1 units, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and so on. Well, we could see that this increase has always been $2, $2, $2, $2, $2, $2, which $2 is the price in this context. So if I were to graph this, because eventually we're going to start putting these revenue curves onto the same graph that we had with our cost curves, which this was price or cost, and this was our quantity of output. Well, in this case here, at $2, we're going to have this situation here, a completely flat curve that regardless of the quantity that I choose to supply, I'll have a situation that at that quantity of output, my average revenue is going to be equal to $2. My price is equal to $2. My average revenue is equal to that. And my extra revenue of supplying an extra unit of output is also equal to $2. So in this context, I have a flat marginal revenue curve. We will see soon that marginal revenue is going to be a very important curve in determining the optimal quantity to supply. So next up, we're going to look at how do we actually maximize profits with this piece of information and information on the costs of this firm.